I graduated at the end of the 1980s, and then I became an accountant and sort of straight away moved to London from my native homeland of New Zealand. I worked for a large computer company to start off with, and then went to work for one of their smaller clients, which they had a lot of potential, but they didn't really have any sort of strategic and financial management capability. So I sort of came in as a shareholder at that point in time and spent the next 9 or 10 years building that business with a business partner. And then we sold to a Fortune 500 company, which meant that I'd had 4 children during that time. So it meant that we could return home to New Zealand for the children to have their schooling in New Zealand. When you live in a different country than your homeland, I think you have to sort of make a conscious decision to, if you're going to move home at any stage, to probably do that before your children sort of reach that 11, 12 years. You definitely don't want to be dragging children into a new environment during their high school years. So it was perfect timing in that respect for me. It had been, having 4 kids, and I did my MBA during that time, running a company. It was quite hard going. So I was sort of looking forward to a change in pace. So going home to New Zealand is a very nice lifestyle place to live. And so for 5 years, I worked as a university lecturer, which sort of meant that I was working with young people who were keen on the business world, and that was perfect for me. The thing I like about angel investing is that it's not sort of a one size fits all. So you can pretty much be involved in the way that you choose. And my club in particular, they allow you to sort of be flexible in the way. So angel investors are really generally operate a little bit like a club, an investment club. And founders from startups, early stage, sort of generally probably sort of first time, after friends, family, and fools sort of round to try and get some outside investment. So the startup founder will generally present to the club, and then there'll be a due diligence process after that, and then individuals or a fund that is made up of club members will invest in that startup. So it's a good, for founders, it's a really good sort of early stage way of funding that first step. And I think the thing that can be really good about it is that you also get what we call smart capital. So often the people that invest in a particular startup, they have knowledge in that area. They can quite often be a little bit older, although we do like young people to join. But this is an interesting one because it's based around home sewing, which is a very sort of fragmented cottage, old-fashioned sort of industry. So I'm sure everybody can imagine that they've walked past some kind of a fabric shop, and it's a bit like a jumble sale. It's sort of stacked to the rafters. It's really hard to navigate, very messy. And so we're trying to sort of digitize or modernize that whole experience of sewing yourself something to wear that fits you well. Not everybody can go to the high street and buy something off the rack that fits them. So it's about Rebecca Page is about sort of offering a digital customer that whole experience of being able to buy the sewing pattern and then collated sort of aspirational fabrics to go with that, and everything else that you might need. Now I met Rebecca because she was on maternity leave and was deciding whether she'd made a couple of PDF sewing patterns sort of as a bit of a hobby and stuck them on Etsy, and it had made quite a few sales. So I run a mentor group for the New Zealand Businesswomen's Network in London, and this particular group that I ran in 2018 were for people that were interested in starting their own business. So Rebecca came along to that 12-week program, and during the course of that 12 weeks and at the end of it, we co-founded Rebecca Page Limited and started working together. We've always been remote based and all of our workforce are females. Our board are all females as well, and so are the co-founders. So we sort of buck the trend, and over half of our investors are also female, which is also a little different than the norm. But working remotely, I suppose we've established quite good processes up front in dealing with that, that sort of team aspect of being remote. So we have people that produce the patterns, and they sort of work together as a sub-team with a leader. And then we have also, sort of more admin and marketing type employees and contractors as well. And they sort of operate within their own team. And then once a week on a Monday at 5 o'clock, we have a team call, which generally isn't too much work-based. We do a little bit of what have you been up to this week, but we also like on that call to share something creative that we've been doing or making. So pretty much all of us are the kind of people that sew our own clothes or involved in crafty type things, and so it's more of a sort of a way of establishing good sort of team relationships, so that we all know a little bit about each other. Seeing we're based in 11 countries, and we probably won't all ever meet at the same time in person. The whole sort of what we're trying to achieve, it's sort of a creative, inclusive, engaged, sort of kind community, and that's what we've got over 370,000 followers, and the whole sort of community is like that. So it's it's a sort of a good vibe feel to everything, and it sort of backs up the culture that we're trying to make for everybody, our customers as well as our team members. So the ladies that work for us, they're if we've got all of our workers directly effectively from our customer base. So we advertise, and we very quickly have to take the advertisement down because we get so many people applying for the job. So we've had a really good experience in that regard of recruiting and retaining our core team. We've always been remote, so we're on Slack and use that sort of the way people communicate these days. We're all quite comfortable with communicating online, so I don't think that's ever been a problem. Rebecca is the sort of the creative person, and I'm more probably the back office type person. So she did a computer science degree along with psychology, so she sort of loves that consumer behavior as well as the tech side, whereas I manage more of the business and sort of strategic, the investor side of things. So I think that works well when you have co-founders that have those sort of complementary skills. A lot of co-founders have done the same degree. They have very similar skills, and then that means that they're often got some gaps if there are co-founders that are similar. Our first year, we turned over, I think, 130,000 US. We had no investment at that stage, so that was just effectively Rebecca and I bootstrapping and seeing how things go. And then in our second year, which is just finished, we more than tripled that. So I think our end revenue was about 425,000, and then we will sort of forecast to triple again this year. So I quite like that triple model in those first 3 years. And then often when you sort of get up to the, 4 or 5 millions, it's harder to triple, and you might have to sort of slow down to a double. But, it'd be good if we could maintain that sort of, that large sort of forecast or goal of tripling your revenue each year. We use the lean startup methodology, which I think for somebody that's new, young people, I work with quite a few young entrepreneurs as well, is sort of, it's a good way of starting off sort of experimenting, testing without sinking too much of your money into any kind of idea that you have. So that sort of feedback loop, the experimental feedback loop, works quite well. So I would recommend, reading and understanding a book like that and sort of following that process if you're new to it. I have a lot with my mentor groups. I have someone say, I'm going to have to start networking now that I'm going to be raising money. And my point to them is networking is just something you do all the time, so that when you need it, you've already got it there. So for, people that are still at university or in the early stage of their careers that are thinking perhaps they would like to be an entrepreneur, I would say to them, definitely start thinking about your networks and building them up. What groups can you join that you will meet people? And, when you're young, just track people down. Most people are very happy to help. And if they're not, you haven't really lost anything. So it's I always say that one of the things you can make a decision about very early on in your career is to be a lifelong learner. And we know with the rate of technology, someone like me, one of my young founders told one of my children that I was quite tech savvy for a mother my age. Now, my children thought that was hilarious because they think I can't even work the remote. But, I've had to sort of learn, tech stuff that sort of, people my age often get a bit rusty in that regard. So, there's always two sides of an equation. Young people can learn, and you can also learn from young people. Everything you look at, if you sort of look with um, a longer term objective that you have in mind, you notice things that you wouldn't otherwise notice. So, a simple analogy of that is that if you're going to buy a car, you all of a sudden notice types of cars and colors of cars that you haven't noticed before. And it's because in your mind you're thinking about that new car. So I say the same thing with, business ideas. What's causing you pain in your life? Can you solve that pain for yourself and other people? And that's often where the best sort of ideas come from. My startups is called Crimson Education. So I would suggest that everybody look up Crimson Education. They have a really good series called A Day in the Life, and it sort of talks to all sorts of students, science, arts, medical, law, from all over the world. And I think by watching those videos, you get a really good idea of what people are doing, and there might be something that sparks with you. We find that careers counsellors at schools in particular do not sort of have a broad global knowledge of what's going on out there in the workforce. So I think don't just sort of say, I'm going to do the bog standard, whatever it might be. Think about what your interests and your passions are, and then look a little broader than that sort of generic route, because I think now we're not going to be in one sort of professional career all of our lives. So it's good to be flexible. It's good to do something that has a research sort of element, a project base, and collaboration and teamwork. So there's lots of things that fill the bill, and also getting involved in projects while you're still at high school, which can sort of dip your toe in the water and test out what it is that you might want to do. I suppose it's always true that you can't really have it all. There has to be something that has to give. My husband would probably take the credit and say that he was remarkably helpful. I'm not sure that was solely true when the children were young, but we did have we had a very good nanny who started when our second baby was 9 weeks old, and I went back to work, and she stayed with us pretty much until that baby left school. So we sort of had that continuity of about 18 years. She did have a few years off in the middle when she had her own children, but definitely good childcare and treating your nanny well, or the carers of your children, because it must be soul destroying for everybody when you go through a whole lot of nannies. I think we sort of had military precision and organization. Our oldest one was only 5 when the fourth baby was born. So these guys were pretty sort of they lived a very strict routine, I suppose you could say, which meant that everybody could sort of cope with their workload and a busy sort of crazy house. So everybody has to decide how to do that themselves. I've effectively since that selling that business in 1998, I've had more of a portfolio career, which has allowed me flexibility at different times in my life. We always think that children need us when they're little, but actually when your children are at secondary school or high school, as the Americans call it, that's often when children's need somebody, a parent or somebody, to be at home when they get home from school. So if you can do something, and owning your own business gives you that flexibility often to work the way that you want to work. So I would recommend that over sort of a big corporate job. I have to be honest, I don't believe I've ever experienced any sort of kind of um, sexual or based on my gender discrimination. So I think it's about having the attitude as that we're all humans first and foremost. It doesn't matter what gender we are. So girls can do anything, and often for girls it can be about having a supportive male, not necessarily role model, but a champion. So your champion doesn't always have to be a woman. So you can look earlier on to somebody. It might be your dad, it might be an uncle or a grandfather, somebody that's willing to take an interest in you, and sort of for you to be able to back questions off and break down some of those barriers. But I think if you approach things in the way that you're at a disadvantage, you're going to put yourself at a disadvantage. So I'd say just go for it.
Thank you for watching The Sarah Scoop Show. Head to sarahscoop.com for more.